put the leftovers in the fridge, and didn't say a word. That was the moment I knew. Not when he told me. Not when I heard her name come out of his mouth at the kitchen table on a Tuesday night like it was nothing. The moment I knew was when I closed the refrigerator door, heard the seal click shut, and realized my hands weren't shaking. I was completely calm. And that calm scared me more than any fight ever had. Let me go back. My husband and I had been married for 2 years when everything unraveled. We met through mutual friends at a backyard barbecue in Phoenix, the kind of late summer evening where the heat finally breaks around 7 and everyone stands around with a beer pretending the weather is perfect. He was funny. He made everyone laugh. He had this way of making you feel like the most important person in the room when he talked to you. And I was not immune to that. Nobody was. We dated for 18 months before he proposed. I was 31. He was 34. He had been married before, to a woman I'll call his ex, and they had a son together. His boy was 6 when we started dating, 8 when we got married. I went into this with open eyes, or at least I thought I did. I knew co-parenting was part of the package. I respected that. I wanted to respect it. What I did not sign up for was what came after. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Tempe for the first year. His ex had their son every other week, and on his weeks with us, I showed up, helped with homework, made dinner, drove him to soccer practice when my husband had late meetings, which happened more than I'd like to admit. I wasn't trying to be his mother. I was just trying to be present, because that boy deserved someone who showed up consistently, and I really believed that showing up was something I was good at. The financial picture took longer to come into focus. My husband worked in sales, commission-based, which means some months were great and some months were very, very quiet. I had a stable job in healthcare administration. Salary, benefits, predictable deposit every other Friday. What started as me covering rent during the slow quarter turned into me covering rent, then the car insurance, then the groceries, then the utilities. He always had a reason. A deal that was almost closed. A commission check that was 2 weeks out. I'm not saying he was lying. I'm saying the 2 weeks kept becoming 4 weeks. And eventually I stopped counting. I paid for almost everything for the better part of a year and a half. I want to be careful here because I know how this sounds. It sounds like I was naive. And maybe I was. But I also loved him. And love has a way of reframing things in the moment that only becomes obvious in hindsight. I told myself we were a team. I told myself this was temporary. I told myself that couples go through hard seasons and what matters is how you come out the other side. The other side never really came. Then his mother moved to Scottsdale. She had been in Oregon for the entirety of our relationship, which, looking back, was probably the reason things felt manageable. She was a presence over the phone. Opinions about the apartment. Opinions about where we should spend holidays. Opinions about how her grandson was being raised. But at least there was distance. When she moved 40 minutes away, the distance disappeared. She was not unkind to me exactly. She was polite in the way that some people are polite when they have already decided they don't like you, but want to maintain plausible deniability. She remembered my name. She asked about my job. She also, in the first month after she moved, referred to his ex by her first name no fewer than a dozen times in front of me, always with warmth, always with a story attached. Did you know she used to make that same recipe? She and I went to that farmer's market once. She called last week, so thoughtful of her. I said nothing. I smiled. I drove home 40 minutes in silence. My husband noticed, or he said he noticed, but his version of addressing it was to squeeze my hand and say, "She doesn't mean anything by it," which is a sentence I have come to understand means, I see what's happening, I don't want to deal with it, and I'm going to hand you a small gesture and hope it's enough. It was never enough. The first Christmas after his mother moved was hard. Not dramatic, not explosive. Just the low-grade hard of feeling like a guest in your own marriage. We drove to her house in Scottsdale on Christmas Eve. There were photos on her mantle. Photos of my husband and his ex at what looked like a birthday party. Photos of the 3 of them, him, her, and their son, at what I recognized as my mother-in-law's house in Oregon, years before I entered the picture. I understood those photos existed. I understood his son deserved to see his parents in his grandmother's home. I was not going to ask her to take them down. But she had 3 new frames on the side table. One was their wedding photo. I found my husband in the kitchen. I kept my voice very even. I said, "Can you come look at something with me for a second?" He looked at the photo. He looked at me. He said, "I'm sure she just forgot to swap it out." I said, "It's in a new frame." He said, "Maybe she found it when she was unpacking." I went to the bathroom. I sat on the edge of the tub for 5 minutes. Then I washed my hands, dried them on the hand towel with the little embroidered snowflakes, and went back to the living room and helped set the table. That was the version of me that existed before the following Easter. Easter was the breaking point. Not because of what happened at Easter exactly, but because of what was announced in the week leading up to it. His mother was hosting. That was fine. His son would be there. That was fine. His son's 2 cousins from his ex's side were also coming, which his mother mentioned in passing, which he confirmed when I asked, which felt like it should have come up earlier, but okay. And then, 4 days before Easter Sunday, my husband sat down across from me at our kitchen table and told me that his ex was also coming to dinner. I remember exactly what I was doing. I was filling out an online form for our health insurance renewal. I had 3 browser tabs open. I looked up from the laptop. I said, "Sorry?" He said her name. He said his mother had invited her because she wanted their son to have both his parents at Easter. He said it was a one-time thing. He said it was for the boy. I said, "Did anyone think to ask me?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "It's not really about you." I want to sit with that sentence for a second because I think about it a lot. It's not really about you. In a marriage. About a major family holiday. At his mother's house where I was expected to show up and smile and pass the roles and behave like this was all perfectly normal. I did not yell. I did not cry. I closed my laptop. I said I needed to take a walk. I walked around the block 3 times, came back inside, and made tea. He was watching television in the living room. He didn't ask how my walk was. I called my older sister that night after he went to sleep. She's the practical one in our family. She listened to the whole thing without interrupting, which is not like her. And when I finished, she said, "I think you already know what you want to do. You're just waiting for permission." She was right. I had known for longer than I was willing to say out loud. I did not make a dramatic decision that night. What I did was make an appointment with an attorney the following Thursday, just to understand my options. Just to know what the landscape looked like from the outside. The appointment lasted an hour. By the time I walked back to my car in the parking garage, I had a much clearer picture of where I stood. Financially, legally, practically. I had been the primary earner for the majority of our marriage. Our names were both on the lease, but I had been paying it almost entirely alone. I had documentation of that. 18 months of bank statements where the math told a very clear story. I did not file anything that day. I sat with it. I went to work. I made dinner. I acted normal because I genuinely was not sure yet, not 100% sure, and I did not want to blow up my marriage on the basis of a bad month. But I also started paying attention in a different way. The week before Easter, I noticed he hadn't mentioned telling his ex about the seating arrangement, or whether I would be introduced as his wife, or whether anyone had thought about how it might feel to sit across a table from the woman whose wedding photo was still on his mother's mantle. I brought it up once, gently. He said, "It'll be fine, you're overthinking it." On Good Friday, I sat in my car in the parking lot of a Trader Joe's for about 20 minutes. I called the attorney's office. I asked about next steps. I spent the weekend being very quiet and very clear-headed. Easter Sunday, I got up early. I made a fruit salad to bring because that is what I had told his mother I would bring, and I am not someone who shows up empty-handed. I showered. I got dressed. I drove to Scottsdale. My husband followed in his car because he was picking up his son on the way. I arrived before most people. His mother greeted me at the door. She was warm in that particular way she had, the warmth that felt like it was meant for someone else. And I just happened to be in the path of it. She told me the salad looked lovely. She told me to put it on the kitchen counter. I did. The house filled up. Cousins arrived. His aunt came. His uncle. His son ran in through the back door already wearing grass stains, which made everyone laugh, and the laugh was real, and the boy was genuinely sweet, and I loved that kid even when I couldn't stand the situation around him. And then the front door opened. She walked in like she'd been coming to this house her whole life, because in some ways, she had. She hugged his mother first. His mother held her for a long moment. Then she hugged his son, who lit up the way kids do when they see someone they love who hasn't been around. She was pleasant-looking and normal and not a villain. I want to be clear about that. She wasn't a villain. The situation was the villain. My husband introduced us with a wave of his hand and a half sentence. You know each other, right? We did not know each other. We had never been introduced. I said hello. She said hello. His mother called everyone to the kitchen to fill their plates. I helped carry things to the table. I poured lemonade. I smiled when someone made a joke. I put food on my plate and sat in the chair that had been set out for me at the far end of the table, which put me next to his uncle on one side and an empty chair on the other. His ex sat next to my husband. His son sat between them. His mother said grace. She thanked God for family. She said she was grateful everyone could be together. I looked at my plate. About 15 minutes into the meal, his aunt asked me how work was going. I told her. She nodded. His mother asked his ex about her new apartment, and she answered, and my husband laughed at something she said, and the conversation flowed around the table in a way that I was not part of. I ate my food. I answered when I was spoken to. I made no scene. 35 minutes into the meal, there was a knock at the front door. His mother looked up. His uncle got up to answer it. There was a brief exchange in the hallway. Low voices, something being signed. And then his uncle came back into the dining room and set a legal-sized envelope on the table in front of my husband. My husband looked at it. He looked at the return address. He looked at me. I kept eating. What is this? He said. You'll want to open it somewhere private, I said. His mother said, what is going on? His son looked at the envelope. He looked at his father. He looked at me. I gave him a small, calm smile because none of this was about him, and I needed him to know that in whatever way a 10-year-old can receive that through a look across a table. My husband pushed back his chair. He was pale. Genuinely pale. The kind that happens when your body processes something before your mind does. He took the envelope and went down the hall. I excused myself from the table. I thanked his mother for the food. I said the lamb was really lovely, and I meant it. I said goodbye to his son. I said it was nice to meet her. And I said it to his ex. And I meant that too. Or at least I meant it as much as I could under the circumstances. I got my purse from the chair by the door. I walked to my car. I sat there for a moment. The neighborhood was quiet. There was a dog barking somewhere 2 streets over. I could see Easter decorations in the window of the house across the street. Paper eggs taped to the glass, a wreath on the door. I started the car and drove home. He called 4 times before I got back to the apartment. I didn't answer. Not because I was being dramatic, but because there was genuinely nothing left to say that couldn't be said through a process. I had made the decision with a clear head over the course of weeks. I had not made it because of the Easter invitation. I had not made it because of his ex or his mother or the seating arrangement. I had made it because I spent 18 months holding a household together for someone who looked at me at a holiday dinner table and thought, it's not really about you. The attorney had told me I was in a strong position. Arizona is a community property state, and the financial records were thorough and undeniable. I moved out 3 weeks later into a furnished apartment I had already put a deposit on. I took my things, split what was actually shared, and left behind everything that had only ever been his to begin with. His mother called me once. She wanted to explain the Easter invitation, how it was about their grandson, how she hoped I understood. I thanked her for calling. I said I understood perfectly. I said I didn't hold any of it against her. I meant all of that. Understanding something and accepting it are 2 different things, and I had chosen not to accept it, and that choice belonged entirely to me. My son. I should clarify, he is not mine biologically, but I had spent 2 years showing up for that kid every week, texted me about a month later. He was old enough to have a phone. He said he missed my mac and cheese. I sent him the recipe. It's been 8 months now. I'm in a 1-bedroom in Tempe that I like more than I expected to. I paid off one of my credit cards last month, the one we'd been carrying a balance on for almost a year. Always close to, but never quite hitting 0. I took a Saturday morning in October and drove out to Sedona by myself. which is something I had been saying I wanted to do for 2 years and never did because there is always something in the way. I sat on a rock and ate a sandwich and looked at the red rocks and thought about nothing in particular. It wasn't a dramatic ending. There was no big confrontation. I didn't need one. What I needed was to stop treating someone else's comfort as more important than my own dignity. And once I understood that, the rest was just logistics. People ask me if I'm angry. I'm not, really. I'm something more like clarified. Like I spent 2 years looking at my life through a window that had a slight distortion in the glass, and now the glass is gone, and everything looks exactly like what it is. The fruit salad, for the record, was good. Someone finished it. I've thought a lot about what it actually takes to walk away from something you built, not the logistics, the attorney, the deposit on the new apartment, the boxes. That part is just time and effort. I mean the internal part, the part where you finally stop arguing with yourself about whether you're being too sensitive, too rigid, too unwilling to compromise. For a long time, I confused compromise with disappearance. I thought being a good partner meant making myself smaller so the other person had more room. I paid the bills without being asked. I showed up to his family's house and smiled at photos I had every right to find hurtful. I took walks around the block to cool down instead of saying what was true. And I called all of that patience, because patience sounded like a virtue and what I was actually doing did not feel like one. What I understand now is that there's a version of patience that is genuinely generous, and there's a version that is just fear wearing a better outfit. I was afraid. Afraid of being the difficult one. Afraid of what it would mean about me if I couldn't make this work. Afraid that needing basic consideration made me demanding. That fear kept me at that table for a long time after I should have stood up and left. The Easter dinner was not the reason I filed. I want to be honest about that. The envelope was already moving through a process before I ever set foot in that Scottsdale house. What that day did was confirm what I had spent months trying to talk myself out of believing, that I was a secondary consideration in my own marriage, not cruelly, not out of malice. Just out of habit, and out of a comfort that had been built long before I arrived and never quite made room for me. That is its own kind of answer. My sister told me I was waiting for permission. She was right, and I've thought about why that was. I think a lot of us are taught, in ways that are hard to point to specifically, that our discomfort needs to clear a very high bar before it counts, that we should be certain before we act, that we should have tried everything, that we should be able to explain it clearly enough that a reasonable person would agree. But sometimes the situation is simply this. You have been paying for a life that doesn't treat you like you belong in it, and you deserve better. And you don't have to prove that to anyone before you act on it. My stepson texted me about mac and cheese. I sent him the recipe. That small thing matters to me more than I can fully explain. It reminded me that leaving a marriage is not the same as leaving a child behind. I showed up for that boy the whole time I was there, and showing up is something people remember even when they're young. I am not angry. I'm not even particularly sad anymore. What I am is clear. And clear is something I haven't been in a very long time.